Like I was just like I'm like cause I just got back from arraignment, and I'm like, all I heard was murder, and I'm just like, damn, like that was that.
Before the headlines, before the snitch jokes, and before the internet turned him into a punchline, 6ix9ine had to face one thing completely on his own: jail. No security detail, no special privileges, no music, no fame. In this clip he opens up about what those first nights behind bars were really like, and how they permanently shifted his mindset. The arrest and initial placement changed everything. On November 18, 2018, federal agents arrested Daniel Hernandez, along with multiple members of the 9 Gangster Bloods, including his former manager Kifano Shati Jordan. The charges were heavy: racketeering, conspiracy, gun offenses, drug trafficking, and even conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors tied Hernandez to incidents like a shooting at the Barclays Center, an armed robbery near Times Square, and ordering hits on rivals. According to the feds, Hernandez wasn't just around the gang, he allegedly used them for protection while bankrolling their activities, putting him at risk of a life sentence with a minimum of 47 years. The arrest happened at exactly 6 p.m., and that timing wasn't random. FBI wiretaps had caught gang members discussing plans to superviolate him, street slang for brutal retaliation, possibly death after he publicly cut ties with his crew on Instagram. Former allies had flipped, and authorities knew his life was officially in danger. At his arraignment on November 19, 2018, the judge denied bail, even after offers topping $1 million and surrendering his passport. Part of the evidence came straight from his own social media, where prosecutors said he openly glorified violence. Hernandez pleaded not guilty. His attorney, Lance Lazaro, pushed back hard, claiming the case was inflated by hearsay and arguing that Hernandez was never a real gang member, just someone selling an image to boost record sales. Then came the decision that stunned everyone. Despite known threats on his life, Hernandez was placed in general population at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a federal jail, infamous for its conditions. The Department of Justice has described MDC as a facility that houses extremely dangerous inmates plagued by overcrowding, understaffing, mold, and frequent violence. This made no sense, especially since federal agents had reportedly taken him into protective custody just days earlier. Lazaro questioned the move, saying it directly contradicted pre-arrest safety measures and put Hernandez at extreme risk because of his celebrity and gang connections. Inside MDC, conditions were brutal: near constant lockdowns, broken facilities, and non-stop noise. Prison consultant Sam Engel has even labeled the jail incredibly dangerous, with some judges refusing to send defendants there at all. Almost immediately, Hernandez ran into tension, including confrontations with other inmates, some purportedly tied to rival gangs like the Crips. These weren't rumors, these were real threats, happening in real time. But what he experienced during that very first night behind bars wasn't what anyone expected. And years later, he would finally explain exactly what went down.
I got locked up at 6 o'clock, right? Rachel, I got locked up at 6 o'clock. That night, I watched the movie on like a Fed phone. Like they gave me like an iPad or whatever, and they said just lay on the rug like and watch a movie. I watched Lone Survivor.
The gap between how his first night was perceived and what actually happened couldn't have been wider. While the media was running with headlines about death threats and dangerous placements, Hernandez was sitting in his cell watching a war movie on an iPad. It was a moment of dark irony, and it said a lot about how he was handling the situation. He wasn't frozen in fear. He was already thinking ahead, weighing his options, and planning his next move. But that brief sense of detachment didn't last long. Reality hit the very next day. Sitting in court, Hernandez listened as the charges were read out loud, one by one end. That's when everything started to feel real.
Last night, I was just like, I'm trying to think about how that night went. No, that night, I was like, you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not, because I just got back from arraignment, and I'm like, all I heard was murder, and I'm just like, damn, like that was that.
The weight of the charges finally set in. Murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, firearms offenses. These weren't small cases or technicalities. These were the kind of charges that could erase him from the outside world forever. But even in that moment, Hernandez's mindset didn't stay stuck in panic for long.
It was just like, after that, it was just like, all right, get through this.
His lawyer made a point to stress that 6ix9ine never personally asked for protective custody, choosing instead to focus on his family's safety as everything spiraled. That detail mattered. Hernandez wasn't pleading for protection. It wasn't hiding. His priority wasn't himself. It was the people close to him. The threats didn't start in jail either. They traced back to his decision to separate from 9. Back in October 2018, after he avoided jail at a plea violation hearing, what should have been a celebration turned chaotic. A dinner ended in a shootout between Shotty's crew and his label's security. FBI wiretaps later picked up gang leaders like Mel Morta and Shotty, discussing greenlighting hits, using language like, "He ain't got nothing to lose anymore." Hernandez even turned down FBI protection at one point, but the danger level forced authorities to step in, partly for his own safety. Once inside, the risk only increased. His potential to cooperate made him a target among Gango-affiliated inmates. People close to him, including associates like Try-Drew and Wizard, reportedly went into hiding after he cut ties with his crew. Some even locked themselves in out of fear. All of it highlighted just how intense those early days of custody really were. Budwin Hernandez later talked about what jail was actually like for him. His version of events told a very different story.
No, they were all like older, like 60, 50. So no, I was in a jail full of rats. Everybody was snitches. Like the jail I was in, everybody snitched. I was like a rat jail.
That revelation flipped the entire narrative. The so-called dangerous general population wasn't exactly what people imagined. The unit was largely made up of cooperators, informants, and older inmates. The threat level was real. It wasn't the non-stop chaos the media painted it to be. Protective custody came shortly after. On November 26, 2018, just days after arriving at MDC, Hernandez was moved out of general population and transferred to a private facility in Queens. The decision followed the bail denial and reports of inmate altercations. And once again, this wasn't something he requested. Federal officials made the call, deciding it was necessary for his safety. The environment Hernandez later described was nothing like the hellscape. People assumed, instead of fighting for his life or constantly watching his back, he spent hours on the phone talking to his girlfriend, trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy inside a completely abnormal situation. Even the physical setup of protective custody looked nothing like the scenes people had been imagining.
To be honest, I thought like it was gonna be a shower, and everybody showered, but when I first got to jail, I was in rat jail. I was in a rat jail, but it was protective custody jail, like protective custody unit. Like it was on like older guys in my pod, and then like the jails were like covered off, like it was privacy.
Do they even have like mofongo and all that?
No, they have like it's pretty good though.
Burritos,
like seasoned food. Like
bro, how do I get locked up?
The interviewer's reaction said it all. What Hernandez was describing sounded almost too comfortable compared to the horror stories people associate with federal detention, but that comfort didn't exist in a vacuum. Hernandez was very clear about why his experience was different. He was a cooperator, and in the federal system, that changes everything. They had a vested interest in keeping him alive, healthy, and ready to testify. What he experienced wasn't normal jail life fit, was the result of a cooperation agreement. The contrast between his unit and the rest of MDC was stark. When the topic shifted to Jeffrey Epstein, Hernandez quickly drew a line between facilities. The Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan where Epstein died was, in his words, the federal version of Rikers Island, dangerous, overcrowded, and falling apart. Hernandez understood exactly where he was housed and why, and he knew just how much worse it could have been. That awareness stood out. Even while incarcerated, Hernandez was analyzing the system around him. He knew the structure, he knew the purpose, and he knew his situation, while serious, wasn't the nightmare people imagined. His time in protective custody passed quietly. No major incidents, no attacks, no violent confrontations. He served his sentence, completed community service, and paid more than $236,000 in restitution after his early release in 2019. Granted, due to cooperation and COVID-19 risks tied to his asthma, Hernandez reflected on that period consistently in interviews with outlets like Vlad TV and Billboard. He downplayed the chaos of 2018, insisting that despite his snitch label, no confrontations ever happened. In a 2020 Billboard interview, he said jail actually made him more fearless, framing it as a life lesson rather than a trauma. He also took aim at hip-hop's selective outrage over 6ix9ine's, calling out artists like 21 Savage, Gunna, and T.I., arguing similar behavior was ignored when it was convenient. To Hernandez, the hypocrisy was obvious. Protective custody wasn't about comfort, it was strategy. Federal authorities needed him alive to testify against the 9 Trey gangster bloods. That trial would later result in multiple convictions, including his former manager Shotty. Hernandez's testimony was central, and his safety was non-negotiable. Beyond the legal strategy, his situation exposed how the federal system handles high-profile cooperators. Isolation, protection, and just enough stability to keep them cooperative. The horror stories of general population didn't apply here. What truly separated Hernandez from a victim narrative was his mindset. Throughout his incarceration, and even more so after he framed his experience through faith instead of fear. In post-release interviews, he spoke with defiance and optimism, repeatedly claiming he faced no confrontations because he stayed calm and grounded. When you walk with the Almighty, you walk confident, no fear, he told interviewers, presenting prison as a spiritual test rather than a breaking point. This belief system allowed him to sidestep the street code he violated. In hip-hop culture, cooperating with law enforcement is considered unforgivable. Informants are shunned, threatened, and sometimes killed. Hernandez faced that backlash, but he refused to wear the shame that usually comes with the label. To him, prison was temporary. Protecting his family was permanent. He even said he'd cooperate again if it meant keeping them safe. This wasn't a man crushed by the system. This was someone who made a calculated decision and stood on it. That calculation showed itself immediately on his first night inside, when he watched Lone Survivor. His mind went straight to cooperation. The movie's central moments where Navy SEALs spare civilians, only to suffer devastating consequences, stuck with him. The lesson was simple: choices have consequences, and survival requires adaptation. And the way Hernandez handled prison reflected that exact mindset. He didn't spend his time pretending to be something he wasn't, plotting revenge or trying to keep gang ties alive. Instead, he spent them on the phone with loved ones, monitoring his commissary balance and holding on to his sanity through routine. The lack of fear, he insisted, wasn't an act. It was calculated. Fear in prison makes you readable. It signals weakness. By projecting confidence and faith, Hernandez built a psychological shield that worked alongside the physical separation of protective custody. That's why his lawyer's insistence that Hernandez never personally requested protective custody mattered so much. It allowed him to say he wasn't scared, that he didn't need special treatment, that the system moved him for its own reasons. Whether that was fully accurate or not, the narrative worked. It helped him retain a sense of dignity inside a system designed to strip it away. He repeated this framing in interview after interview. Never had no problems. Thank God, he told Vlad TV, crediting divine protection rather than federal intervention. The religious language stayed consistent throughout his public statements, but beneath the faith-based explanation sat a more pragmatic truth. Hernandez understood leveraged. He knew his value to federal prosecutors came from one thing: his willingness to testify. As long as that stayed intact, they had every reason to keep him alive. His cooperation wasn't emotional, it was transactional, and he used it accordingly. That mindset didn't just keep him safe, it became a weapon. Hernandez openly challenged hip-hop street code, calling out what he saw as selective outrage. He pointed to artists like 21 Savage, Gunna, and T.I., arguing that similar cooperation was overlooked when it suited the industry. This wasn't defensive spin, it was an offensive move. By questioning the moral authority of his critics, he undercut their attacks. In the 2025 VLAD TV interview, he reflected on how early arrests hardened him, but he framed everything through survival, not regret. He talked about being arrested at 17 for drug sales and learning how to navigate systems built to break young men like him. Prison wasn't unfamiliar territory, it was an escalation of lessons he'd already learned. His most extreme position came when he said he'd do it again every time if it meant protecting his family. That statement rejected the entire value system of street loyalty and replaced it with a different code altogether. Family first, survival first, consequences secondarily. That shift showed up clearly in how he talked about his later incarcerations in 2024 and again in 2026. When he surrendered at MDC Brooklyn on January 6, 2026, he arrived in a luxury van with streamer Aiden Ross and content creator Steve Wilduit, live streaming the moment. They sang Justin Bieber's Baby before he walked inside. This wasn't the behavior of someone haunted by jail. This was someone who had already accepted it. In interviews, he brushed off past jail stints as uneventful. He even recorded a song titled First Day In with Ross and Cuffham, directly referencing incarceration while dissing rivals. His spokesperson framed the moment as one of self-improvement continuing a pattern Hernandez had already established.